Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the KR universe. Allow me to present to you the second part of my perspective about this Supreme Council elections intrigue. A KR crisis brought about by the pandemic. Crisis because the pandemic threw a wrench to the 2018 bylaws of the KOR. It is definitely up for a challenge. I hope that you would be enlightened with this presentation and put in perspective the cliche elections have consequences. Thus, I entitled this presentation as Supreme Council, Consequential Elections, Rule of Men, or Rule of Law, Part 2. As a review, there was a leadership crisis in the propaganda movement. It was decided that responsable be elected by 2/3 vote. The election took place in February 1891 between the Rizalistas and Pilaristas. After the third voting, Rizal became the responsable, but Rizal declined the position and ended his relations with the propaganda movement in the hope that this would rally the Ilustrados under a new responsable, Marcelo H. del Pilar. Rizal retired from the propaganda movement owing to the intrigues of his jealous compatriots, and he stopped writing articles altogether from the La Solidaridad. Again, here are the goals of the propaganda movement. Rizal came back to the Philippines after this election in 1892. At this time, he had finished his second novel, El Filibusterismo. Believing that the new phase of the propaganda is to be waged in the Philippines, on July 3, 1892, in a house at Ilaya Street, Tondo, Manila, he founded the La Liga Filipina. According to Zaide, Rizal believed that the fight for Filipino liberties had assumed a new phase. It must be fought outside Spain. In fact, it must be fought in the Philippines. The La Liga Filipina, its aims are more insular and civic than that of the propaganda movement. These are 1. Union of the archipelago. 2. Mutual protection in all cases of pressing necessity. 3. Defense against all violence and injustice. 4. Encouragement of all education, agriculture, and commerce. 5. Study and application of reforms. In the founding of the La Liga Filipina, in July 3, 1892, one of the attendees was Andres Bonifacio. Incidentally, Apolinario Mabini was there as well. In a few days, the La Liga Filipina will be quelled, and Rizal would be banished for 4 years in Dapitan. In that 4 years, Andres Bonifacio, an admirer of Dr. Rizal, having a slightly different perspective on the struggle from Spain, made the Katipunan a bona fide armed organization against Spain. The aims of the Katipunan are more radical and violent than that of the La Liga Filipina, a total turnaround from the aims of the propaganda movement. The aims of the Katipunan is 1. To develop a strong allegiance with each and every Katipunero. 2. To unite the Filipinos into one solid nation. 3. To win Philippine independence by means of an armed conflict or revolution. 4. To establish a republic after independence. This is the historical background that has significance in the 2023 Supreme Council elections. Having that in mind, let us try to relate the 1891 propaganda movement election and its consequences to the present controversial Supreme Council elections. What are the objectives? In 1891 propaganda movement elections, they wanted to patch up differences and unify. They want to unify under one leadership, under one responsable. 2023 or 2024 KR elections, the objective is to elect a new set of 9 Supreme Council officers. Also, correct elections timeline per bylaws. The election that was held in 2018 was held in September due to the pandemic 2020. The Ilihu Supreme Council, with the concurrence of the Council of Elders, extended the term to 6 months. It was supposed to end June, but it did not because of the pandemic. However, the Ilihu Supreme Council ceased operations when the Calderon Supreme Council took effect in December 2021. Platforms. There were 2 platforms, the Del Pilar platform and the Rizal platform during the 1891 propaganda movement elections. And this platform, one platform, would control the movement after this election, and so they thought. In the 2023 or 2024 KR elections, reforms in the IHQ operations, the sudden resignation of the bookkeeper of the international headquarters paved the way for problems with regard to the funding operations and disbursement systems for the IHQ. Of course, this happened during the pandemic. It would have dramatic consequences, as we will find out later. This is an emphasis that part of the Calderon Supreme Council wants to zero in. Another platform is the programmatic approach. There is part of the Calderon Supreme Council who would want the IHQ to continue its mandate and leave the IHQ operation issues on the background. They deemed that after the legal minds in the IHQ had decided on steps to take to correct these issues, the IHQ should operate as usual, and continuance of operations based on KOR mandates not be sacrificed. However, these 2 platforms were pushing back at each other, especially on the part of the minority in the Supreme Council. The undercurrents of the election of 1891 propaganda movement. There were division between the Ilustrados, between Dr. Jose Rizal and Marcela H. Del Pilar. They needed to refocus on the perspective that was held by both leaders. In the 2023 or 2024 KOR elections, resignation of the executive director a few days ago, in as of this report, in a surprising move to the regular Knights, the executive director resigned. He resigned when there is a looming controversy in the IHQ, the elections included. KOR versus Maureen et al. 3 IHQ officer personnels, including Maureen Fernandez, is facing legal action. This stems from mishandling of KOR funds. Recently, there was a need to refile the legal lawsuit, but it is still very much the centerpiece of the IHQ reforms. The 4 versus 5 majority, while there is a pushback, the majority in the Supreme Council is enjoying tremendous gains in the programmatic emphasis of the IHQ. Please refer to the previous report by Supremo Calderon. The IHQ is not without controversies, just like the propaganda movement. Disagreements are normal, but the recent developments in the IHQ seem to point to a strife in the international organization. Issues that might point to the new direction in the next Supreme Council elections. Like I said before, on March 10, 2023, in a letter to Supremo Gerardo Calderon, Sir Gilbert San Diego resigned irrevocably from his position as Executive Director of the Knights of Rizal, effective as of writing. At the same time, he also provided a Facebook announcement about the resignation. During the International Assembly on January 30, 2023, a Monday at the Manila Hotel, part of the program was the reporting of Supreme Council member Sir Dean Suba regarding the ongoing case of KOR versus Fernandez et al. Of course, for those who went to the International Assembly, they know that this reporting did not occur for some reason that we are not at liberty to divulge this time. The ongoing legal action, the lawsuit, is on qualified theft. Qualified theft is if the value of the thing stolen in qualified theft is over 4,200,000, and it is pretty close to that, and that is in pesos. The prescribed penalty is maximum period of reclusion temporal in its medium and maximum periods, which has a range of 18 years, 2 months, and 21 days, to 20 years, and incremental penalty of 2 years or more. To make the issue of the Supreme Council elections more complicated, the regional commander chimed in by making a motion based on the practicality or lack of preparation if the election was to be held in May 28, 2023. They moved to hold the elections in May 2024. It is dated January 28, 2023. This motion was agreed upon 1 day before the International Assembly. Only 2 regional commanders did not take part in this motion. This motion was resolved and is being considered by the Council of Elders in the last Supreme Council meeting. The resolution on the motion was not without controversy and not without spirited exchange, bordering on heated exchanges on both parties, enough that some of the Supreme Council members reportedly left the meeting without any explanation. The consequences of these elections in 1891 on the propaganda movement: Rizal abdicated his leadership. He also retired from the propaganda movement. Rizal stopped writing articles for the La Solidaridad. In the 2023 or 2024 KOR elections, the power of the Council Elders. The Council of Elders is considering this active resolution from the motion made by the regional commanders, sponsored by one member of the Supreme Council during the last meeting. There are bylaws challenge. There's a lecture about what are the specifications of the bylaws with regard to the Supreme Council election. This is up for review. At the end of the day, the Council of Elders has to make the concluding remarks. For whatever it's worth, I have taken the position of holding the elections in 2023 and giving the Supremo a chance to run again, since due to unforeseen and circumstances beyond his control, he would not be qualified in the 2-year term limit, because if the election was held in May 2023, he would only have served 1.5 years if the elections were to be held. This is akin to what happened to Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, who did not have the 6-year term and was eligible to run again. Thus, he was president for a total of 11 years. At any rate, the 2018 bylaws is up for the most stringent challenge. New direction and challenges. Rest assured that the Council of Elders, which is made up of 2 former Supreme Court Chief Justices, will be on top of the situation. We are in good hands. Whatever the results of their conclusive and terminal decision on the matter. Lastly, let me remind you of another election that happened this time in 1897, 6 years after the 1891 election of the propaganda movement. The Tejeros Convention divided the Katipunan more than it united them. Until now, the effects of this election paints our national history and identity. During the Tejeros Convention, General Emilio Aguinaldo was elected president of the Katipunan, president of the revolutionary government. The Supremo, Andres Bonifacio, was ridiculed and belittled during the Tejeros Convention. He stormed out and declared the convention null and void. A few months after this convention, it was deemed that actions of Bonifacio during and after the convention was treasonous. Andres and Procopio Bonifacio were tried on charges of treason by the members of the War Council of Aguinaldo's government. On May 10, 1897, the brothers were executed. The execution was signed by President Emilio Aguinaldo. Elections have consequences. The 1891 and 1897 are a matter of opinion on what it served history. A similar elections debacle in the year of 2023 in the Supreme Council of the KOR led to a division in the leadership. We had 2 Supreme Commanders at that time. I also have a videotape on that, as interpolated by Sir Paul Bilowan, then a member of that Supreme Council. The good news is that we learned from that. The Lina bylaws of 2005 and the Puno bylaws of 2018 provided measures on preventing the mirror of the 2003 elections. We are in good hands. It is hoped that we can come out of this a little bit more stronger and a little bit more wiser. In that regard, thanks for listening, and Nanam Nis Moriara.